one of the main thrusts in descriptive research is surveys. Because surveys go out and they ask for questions and you get information back on them, and they are a cross-section of a larger block. And being a cross-section of a larger block, you can go out and you can put these together and get some useful information out of them. When we're talking about a survey, it says we're acquiring information about one or more groups of, let's say, characteristics. We may be looking at a specific characteristic. We might be looking at an opinion. This is election year. And in election year, they go out and they do opinion polls. They ask people opinions. What do you think about this? And 95% of the people say they don't like the way this is going. Now, what does that mean? It just means 95% of the people don't like the way it's going. It doesn't mean that they all agree on how things are going wrong. They just don't like what's going on. So you can get an opinion out of it. You can look at an attitude. What is somebody's attitude towards a specific thing? And in survey research, we can do that. You can look at perceived experiences. You went on this particular ride. What did you think about it? And all of that's survey. When we deal with survey research, the concept is to learn about a large population. We do it by designing a sample that's going to go out and get us the best information about that particular design that we have. So we want to think about it and we want to program this out and figure out where we can do this the best way. Interestingly, survey research defines a particular spot in time. When we look at it, we said political year. In a political year, they're constantly doing a survey. The survey looks at the specific spot in time when the survey was done. 3 days later, when the results come out, everything could have changed, but they're looking at that particular spot in time when we are dealing with that material. Surveys, when we do research with surveys, one of the ways we do it is face-to-face. You can go up there and you can talk to somebody and you can ask them questions. You can jot it down. Now, remember, when you do that, you may or may not get an honest answer out of it. You can do telephone research. Political season, they phone up all the time asking, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? We're trying to prove this. What do you think about this? And all of that is a survey. Or you can do a questionnaire. Political season, I get questionnaires all the time. They send them to me in the mail. Our opinion is this. Given this and that, what do you think about this? You can do it in a questionnaire form. Now, remember, not always do you get an accurate sample on what you're doing, but you're getting a survey. Or you could use something like SurveyMonkey. One of the interesting things at the university is anytime I do a training, they've got a questionnaire afterwards. What do you think about this? You buy a new car, they've got a survey, and they want you to tell them that they did absolutely excellent. Excellent is the new mediocre. Because if everybody does excellent, that means it's just average service. But you can find that out on the SurveyMonkey. When we do service research, we have to look at data collection. How are we collecting the data? How much data do we have? How are we going to process it? And that's one of the real challenges with surveys. Substantial phenomena are phenomena that are real, they can be measured, that people often talk about. So when we're dealing with survey research, we often use substantial phenomena, which people actually have tangible evidence that occurs. Insubstantial phenomena, on the other hand, are things that cannot be pinned down where you cannot measure them. You may have a numerical scale that can measure something like gross domestic product, but it's really an imaginary value. Now, people do have opinions about these, and therefore you can still do surveys on them. Now, one of the other things we look at are rating scales. And rating scales basically come down to discrete data because you're asked to give a number in there that doesn't necessarily follow a bell-shaped curve. One of the common ones is this, which you may recognize out of a doctor's office, where it talks about a pain assessment tool. And my physician has said that these are absolutely worthless because nobody goes to the doctor until they're about an 8, which means everybody's either dying or close to death based on this. No one goes into the doctor's office because they're feeling no pain. But you can see they're discrete data because you've either got a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You don't have all the possibilities of saying, well, actually mine's at 2.47. No, it's discrete data. So when you're doing surveys, you have to look at this. When you build a questionnaire for a survey, you have to be very careful about how you do it and make sure that you've got things going in the right direction. You need to keep it short. If it's too long, people won't answer it. There was a survey that they wanted to use for evaluating a particular course. And they had 75 questions on it. Nobody wants to take a survey that's 75 questions long. Whenever you do a survey, this shouldn't take any more than 2 or 3 minutes of your time. if you go on there, would you take a survey afterwards? And we won't take any more than 4.5 hours of your time. No, I'm not taking that survey. Keep it short. Keep the respondent's tasks simple and concrete. You're looking for specific information. You've got specific things that you want. You're going to keep it short. You're going to keep it concrete. Provide straightforward, specific instructions. It should be easy to follow. I remember the story about one time when a professor put down on an exam, everything you need to pass this exam is in this room. And he gave the exam out, and the exam was a bear. And halfway through, he asked, who'd like to go in another room and take a different exam? And half the people got up and left, and he failed them all because the instructions said everything you need to pass the exam is in this room. So make sure that your instructions are straightforward. Use simple, clear, unambiguous language. And sometimes that's kind of tough because a word may have 14 different meanings, which means you may not want to use that particular word. You give a rationale for any items whose purpose may be unclear. We are trying to gather this information for this and this reason, so that people know what you're trying to do and know what's coming out of this. And then it says check for unwarranted assumptions implicit in your questions. You can ask a question many different ways, and if you ask it many different ways, people might interpret it differently. That means you may have something that your question is asking to one person that it's not asking to something else. Determine in advance how you'll process the responses. What are you looking for as far as responses is how they're going to be processed and which way you're going to be able to deal with them. And all of this comes into building this questionnaire. So you can see it's taking a lot of time to make it really work out right. And then you check it for consistency. You don't put down on a question, rate this from high to low and put high as 1 and low as 5. And on another one, rate this from high to low and put low as 1 and high as 5. So when you look at it, check it for consistency. And then it says conduct a preliminary study to check the survey. Send it around to people who can tell you whether or not they've got a problem with it, to see whether or not people are interpreting things wrong. And you can do this with a preliminary study. When you do the survey, several different methods. One of the easy ways is to use technology, because if you use technology, it automatically processes the results for you. If you can do it on a computer screen somewhere, that's the best, because then you don't have to process the information. You can do things by email. You can do it by SurveyMonkey, but it's technological. Make it look professional. Don't make it look like it's written on notebook paper, because people won't want to do it. They won't trust what you've got. And keep track of who has and has not responded, so that if you go after people, you don't go back to those people who have already responded. Sometimes you can use a scannable answer sheet. I got a survey from a hospital in Boston, wants to do a study, and all the answers were bubble in and put it in the envelope, send it back. So they can scan it and they can tell you where it's coming from. If you've got a single location area and you want people to take a survey, go ahead, set up a computer, let them do it on the screen, and you're done with it. When you look at these, you need to get sample questions that will give you indications of which way things are going. It says we often look for tendencies in there. And sometimes a tendency will show you that there may be a problem with the question, or there may be something else going on. You want to look at inaccuracy. An inaccuracy in labeling could show a positive high or a positive low. And this will also tell you whether or not you've got a problem with your question. You can look at differences in setup. You have to make sure that you do things in the same manner all the way through. If you say A is positive, B is negative, don't swap them around, because as soon as you swap them around, you're going to confuse people.